Public data may be public, but it's not always so accessible. It's really nice when you can request data simply by making an API call, but that's actually the exception rather than the rule when you think about all the data that is available in our world, especially when you're talking about data that is managed by the government. Oil and gas drilling data falls into this category of data that's hard to get. It's publicly available technically, but it might be at some government bureaucrat's office on his desktop somewhere in a PDF file. Oseberg is a company that is building a tool for analyzing oil and gas data. Oseberg is a rich dashboard for knowledge workers to query and visualize the data. It's sort of like a Bloomberg terminal for oil and gas knowledge workers. Evan Anderson is the CEO of Oseberg, and he joins me to discuss building a business where the data is hard to acquire and building a product for oil and gas knowledge workers. Interesting episode. I think you're going to enjoy it. Artificial intelligence is dramatically evolving the way that our world works. And to make AI easier and faster, we need new kinds of hardware and software, which is why Intel acquired Nervana Systems and its platform for deep learning. Intel Nervana is hiring engineers to help develop a full stack for AI, from chip design to software frameworks. Go to softwareengineeringdaily.com/Intel to apply for an opening on the team. To learn more about the company, check out the interviews that I've conducted with its engineers. Those are also available at softwareengineeringdaily.com/Intel. Come build the future with Intel Nervana. Go to softwareengineeringdaily.com/Intel to apply now. Evan Anderson, you're the CEO of Oseberg. Welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Thank you for having me.
So you're building a tool for analyzing oil and gas data, and this is a rich dashboard that knowledge workers can take advantage of. Who are some of the knowledge worker type of roles in the workplace that can take advantage of a dashboard for oil and gas data?
Yeah, so we serve a diverse group of customers, mostly on the upstream side of the oil and gas industry, but also on the midstream side of the oil and gas industry. And within the upstream and midstream sectors, we work with anybody from business development, commercial development, A&D, new ventures, land, engineering, geology, exploration, and then there's a long tail of customers in the service sector, whether it be attorneys, brokers, mineral buyers. So a lot of different groups within the upstream, midstream sector.
Mm-hmm. There is the analogy of the Bloomberg terminal. A Bloomberg terminal is this thing that you see when you go to trading floors or you go to anybody who is in finance and they're working for a high salary because this Bloomberg terminal is pretty expensive, but it's essentially a dashboard into all of the financial data and financial news that you could ever want. And so Oseberg is kind of like that for oil and gas data. Explain that analogy a little more.
Yeah, so I would say that we use, Bloomberg and Capital IQ as analogs to our business for folks that are just not familiar with oil and gas. Because fintech, I feel like, has been around a lot longer than energy tech. And what we're trying to communicate there is that, the fintech industry figured out a long time ago that there's incredible value from public information, but that public information, there's this beautiful paradox about public data. It's supposed to be freely available. And you would think that it's pretty easy to access and to aggregate and to extract information from that public data. But, it's actually very difficult. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of domain expertise to know where this information is. It takes a considerable logistical effort to aggregate this information. It takes a technical effort to extract quality data from public information. You're dealing with a lot of public documents that are unstructured. And in many cases in the oil and gas industry, this information can come in the form of microfiche and still paper format. Mm-hmm. And so, the fintech industry figured out a long time ago that if you could create super high quality data sets and then build B2B SaaS products in order to enable folks to interact with that data and generate insight from that information that there's value there. And so that's the extent, that we are, analogous to a Bloomberg or Capital IQ. We can certainly sell to hedge funds or anybody that's buying or selling equities. We've got some unique data to help there, but we're not a trading platform, and the bulk of our users are not, in the commodities space, making trades utilizing our data.
When you're talking about getting data that is in unstructured documents, you're talking about things like these PDFs where it's some old document that's been scanned in that talks about the location of a well somewhere or some agreement. And so if you want to pull that kind of information into a dashboard and present it in a well-formed experience, you've kind of got two options. You can either go to these different companies that are producing the data in a unstructured fashion and request that they do it in a more structured fashion, which is probably intractable, or you can take it in-house and maybe apply NLP and image recognition and stuff to be able to parse text and information out of these documents that are not well structured. Is there a third option, or did you pick one of those two and leverage it?
Yeah, so first of all, you're lucky if you can find something in a PDF. And when we're talking about unstructured, none of these instruments are the bulk of what we work with. There are no forms. These are agreements. These are, paragraphs, multi 5 to 10 to 40 paged, documents where attorneys do reuse some language, but for the most part, they're all very unique. DPI quality is an issue if you do find documents that are imaged. And yeah, your options are, I think the incumbents in the space, the problem that they were trying to solve in the late 80s and early 90s is to just make this information available online. And so the way that they were architected and built were, kind of like library catalog systems. If you know the name of the book, if you know the author or a key word, then you can locate the book and you can read the book. And if you look at legal tech and fintech, we've moved way beyond that. We're much more interested in the contents within the book, and we're much more interested in doing time series analysis on all the extracted data, or looking at patterns within the information and combining information to create new information and derivatives thereof. We do use information extraction technology, so we'll use image recognition, NLP, and then there are a lot of instruments that where you have handwriting that unfortunately it's pretty difficult to use technology, and so we also use a lot of humans. That's just the nature of the beast.
Of course. In my last question, I was talking about the images like documents and, that sort of information where it's a legal document or something. But you've obviously also got all of this data that's streaming off of wells because they have sensors set up, and these oil and gas companies are collecting tons and tons of data about how their wells work. Can you get plugged into those data streams, or are those companies like Exxon or whoever is drilling? I don't know the drilling industry very well, but are they willing to share those data sets with you?
Yeah, good question. So this kind of hardware-software combination in the oil field is really intriguing. There are a lot of companies working on that problem. What you're talking about are what we call SCADA systems. And there are a lot of really interesting problems in that space, for sure. That's not really a space that we play in.
I see.
We appreciate the work that a lot of technology companies are doing there. They're lowering the cost of SCADA so that more and more operators can get real-time information in the field. This is what people are talking about when they talk about the digital oil field. What we love about people, solving problems in that space is that they're helping teach companies how to utilize data. The oil and gas industry is still really trying to figure out how to utilize a lot of the information that they have. For the first time in the last 5 years, we're seeing big E&P companies hire predictive analytic teams. We see companies like Palantir entering the space. Those are all really good signals for us, because what those companies are primarily dealing with is proprietary data that these companies own, and it tends to be a lot cleaner and easier to work with.
That's right.
We're tackling a much different problem. That all that information tells you a lot about the assets that you own, It tells you a lot about the assets that you operate and manage. What we're working to do is tell you a lot about the assets you don't own, about your competitors. And that's by definition, a much larger problem and a much more difficult problem.
Right. And it's something where you could build a moat around that problem, build a pretty good business. And then when these predictive analytics companies or even Exxon starts to become a data company where they're selling their data, you could buy that data, you could repurpose it into your own dashboard, and people could cross-reference it with the kind of stuff that you've got a moat around. So it's good positioning. And just to give people an idea of like what this kind of data is and what you can do with it, I did read a blog post on the Oseberg blog about well spacing. I think this is a good example of a study that somebody could do with your data. Explain what well spacing is and how a study of that can yield business value.
Yeah, so well spacing started because I don't know if spindle top means anything to you, but there was a time in Texas and even in Oklahoma where wells were drilled literally, right next to each other over and over and over again. And what we learned was that wasn't the most efficient way to drill and produce wells. You were losing the energy, the reservoir pressure quickly, that's required to push oil and gas up the wellbore. And so the concept of well spacing was created in order to protect against, waste and drainage and protect correlative rights. And it exists in every state, but it exists it's executed differently in each state in terms of how they regulate well spacing. And historically, this has been a regulatory document that has not been part of the workflow of somebody doing exploration. This isn't a document that has been used historically to signal, an interesting event. But every well needs to be spaced, and every formation or every depth needs to be spaced before you can drill and produce here in Oklahoma. So it's upstream from filing an intent and drilling and producing a well. And there are a lot of different ways that spacing data can be utilized in order to tip off activity. So we looked at spacings back in 2007 here in Oklahoma. There was a company, Devon Energy, that filed 7 spacings in one day in a formation that hadn't really been spaced on 640 acres before. It was a Six Sigma event. And it was the beginning of the Cana Woodford, which is, a very big natural gas play here in Oklahoma. That's never really been done before. Spacing data hadn't really been utilized in that way. Oftentimes you want to see what has been spaced, but also what has not been spaced. Oftentimes formations were spaced in different price environments. And then whatever ideas somebody had at the time were abandoned when pricing changed. And so you can go back and look at historical spacings to get a sense for what some explorationists were thinking. There's a number of different ways of which you could use spacing data. This kind of plays into what differentiates us from a lot of folks in the market, which is, the well development life cycle starts in the county courthouses. It starts with all the public records. It starts in the same place where divorce decrees are filed, where probates are filed. That's where you go in order to determine who owns mineral rights, because those are the executive rights that you need to lease in order to have the right to go in and drill and explore and produce oil and gas. So, that's a very interesting space because a lot of the information is not digitized. The title industry is a huge industry in terms of figuring out who owns what and what encumbrances exist on their assets. And a lot of that information is unstructured in paper format. And we play in that space a little bit. And then at the other end of the well development life cycle is the exploration process, actually permitting a well, getting a permit from the state to being able to drill a well, completing a well, producing it, optimizing production, looking at frac data to optimize your completion techniques, things like that. But what sits in between those two bookends, the courthouse and drilling and producing wells, is the regulatory environment. And in Oklahoma, there's about 95 different regulatory documents. In Texas, there's something on the scale of 200. And there's a lot of really interesting information within those regulatory documents that can be used for a number of different things, depending on who you are and what you're interested in.
This is all public information?
It's public information, but it's not necessarily online. It's not going to be necessarily in the TIFF or PDF. It might be in an old EBCDIC database if it is in a database. A lot of it's going to be a microfiche. If it is online, you're not going to be able to go into Google and search for it. You're going to have to know where to look. And many times we have to make requests. And there are multiple regulatory agencies. Here in Oklahoma, we have the Tax Commission, the Water Resources Board. You have the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. You have a lot of different governing agencies that have really interesting data sets. And so it takes a bit of domain expertise to know where to go just to find the information. And then you have the challenge of aggregating it. And then once you've aggregated it, then you have the technical challenge of extracting information out of that data and creating super high quality data sets, and then great B2B SaaS products so that people can actually interact with this data in a meaningful way.
Don't let your database be a black box. Drill down into the metrics of your database with 1 second granularity. Vivid Cortex provides database monitoring for MySQL, Postgres, Redis, MongoDB, and Amazon Aurora. Database uptime, efficiency, and performance can all be measured using Vivid Cortex. Vivid Cortex uses patented algorithms to analyze and surface relevant insights, so users can be proactive and fix performance problems before customers are impacted. If you have a database that you would like to monitor more closely, check out vividcortex.com/sedaily. GitHub, DigitalOcean, and Yelp all use Vivid Cortex to understand database performance. Learn more at vividcortex.com/sedaily and request a demo. Thank you to Vivid Cortex for being a repeat sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. It means so much to us. Not to mention the fact that it's not just banging on their doors once and getting a collection of documents. You actually have to do this on an ongoing basis, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if it were easy as writing a web crawler, my life would be much, much happier.
But then you wouldn't have a defensible business.
Exactly. No, we definitely have to roll up our sleeves and be creative about how we go and aggregate this data. And it's a big challenge, but it's a lot of fun.
Have you been able to set up relationships like at the very worst where it's like, can you guys just like FTP this file every week, once a week? Do you have those kind of relationships?
Yeah, but they're rare. We love to see, state regulatory agencies that offer that. I believe, even the state of Louisiana has an API into some of their data, which is amazing. But that's very rare. Here in Oklahoma, for example, one of the big issues that recently came to light was, does horizontal drilling and fracking create earthquakes? We had a huge surge in earthquakes here, and it really unnerved the public. The Corporation Commission is the governing entity that has a lot of the data around saltwater disposal wells. That was believed to be the issue, is that with horizontal drilling and fracking, there's a lot of wastewater. And that wastewater has to be disposed, and it's disposed in these formations deep, tens of thousands of feet below the surface. It's pumped into those formations and it creates pressure. And if you're near a fault, you might conceivably create more earthquakes. And so we need to figure out where these saltwater disposal wells and where were they relative to faults. And when the public went to the Corporation Commission to get this information, they have 6-7 different databases. The data is not, all in one place. It's not clean. It's very difficult for them to answer those questions because, unfortunately, they haven't had the resources to really have the infrastructure in place to collect this information. I'd be surprised if it was all even digitized. And so they have a difficult time answering, those kind of basic questions. And important policy decisions are made around, that data.
And in the process of scaling this business, I think about if you're trying to get all these different data sources to send you documents, because it sounds like a lot of this data is just in documents that, like you said, is unstructured. It's a PDF or it's a scanned document. Is the process of scaling that just like hiring a bunch of, I don't know what you would call them, account managers or something, where every week or every day, these account managers are emailing a set of people and saying, hey, please send us these documents. We need these documents so we can integrate them into Oseberg. Is that what the process is like? Because I'm just trying to understand how you get the data in a timely fashion when some new court document has been uploaded and you want to quickly get the pipeline of that document sent to you. You want to scan it into Oseberg. You want to apply NLP or image recognition or just have somebody read it and manually enter the data, whatever it is. You need to do that in a timely fashion. I'm just wondering how you do that in a scalable way.
Yeah, so I'll just say that you have to be really smart about it. I mean, we went and tackled 72 counties of public information in Texas in a period of 4 months and acquired over probably 100 million records. And, it was an incredible feat. I was really, really proud of our team, but you've got to be really smart about it. And yes, the problem doesn't end after that historical corpus has been built. You have the ongoing maintenance of keeping it updated. And so you have to be smart about that too. We spent a lot of time thinking about how to do that. And it's not a linear problem. So it's not a problem that you just throw more bodies at.
Right.
You do have to be strategic about it, or else it can, it is expensive, but it can be insanely expensive if you're not smart about it.
Do you put into the product, hey, this data may not be up to date? Because I can imagine I'm sure this is like way better than whatever these oil and gas knowledge workers had before. I mean, they had nothing. They had no Bloomberg terminal-like experience, but still there's going to be times where, okay, we haven't gotten this document, like this well-spacing data may not be up to date. Do you tell people that in the interface, or do you just kind of give them the best that you can and just present that as, I don't know. What do you do for that?
Yeah, we definitely communicate because each document type is going to have a different timeline associated with it. Like in many cases, we're as up to date as we can be. And what I mean by that, for example, production data in Oklahoma is reported through the tax commission. And if you read the statutes here in Oklahoma, the tax commission has 5 months to audit production data. So if the tax commission were running as efficiently as possible, they would be as up to date as of 5 months ago. And in many cases, they're not as up to date as of 5 months ago. And the industry just understands that. So we don't really have to communicate that to the market. But there are cases where we're bringing data sets to market that haven't been historically brought to market. And we do need to educate the market as to, how timely that information is going to be. But for, in cases where, the data is available, every day, we get it every day. And so we're as of up to date as of yesterday. And so we're as near real time as possible.
Right. There are some third-party data providers, I imagine, in this space, because I know in all of these spaces, like whether you're doing container shipping or healthcare logistics, there will be some third-party data provider that aggregates data and can sell it to you as an API. Are there some of those that you can pull data from, or do you want that data at all?
In some cases, yes. So we're always looking to see who has data and information. And we've got kind of a business development team that kind of vets that out. And we've made some acquisitions. We've done some partnerships. Absolutely. I mean, we don't take the position that we have to build it all ourselves. But, it wasn't that long ago that data has really become currency. What we find is that when people build data, often is the case that they're not doing a lot of analysis of the data to figure out how accurate it is or how clean it is. And so in many cases, we end up building our own data sets because there's a lot that we want to do with this data and we want it to be clean. We want to be able to statistically prove that with 98% confidence, we have less than 1% error rate. When you're acquiring or partnering with, it's sometimes more difficult to do that. And so, our preference would be, that we create all of our data, but it's not a requirement. We've partnered and we've acquired data before.
You mentioned Palantir as an example of a company that does predictive analytics. They do a build your own dashboard sort of experience. It's similar to Bloomberg. It's a big tool for knowledge workers. So you think about Palantir, you think about Bloomberg, maybe you think about any of the other interfaces for manipulating and working with data at a high level. How do those products inspire the interface that you built for Oseberg? And I guess more generally, how do you think about the user interface that you want to present to the oil and gas knowledge worker? What kinds of widgets and features are you trying to provide to such a diverse group of people who are looking at oil and gas data?
Yeah, good question. So you can start with search. We would like to bring NLP search across our data sets to the industry. That's something that we're really excited about and that we haven't seen in the space. Then you can talk about mapping. This industry, maps are integral to this industry. Contextualizing the information and visualizing it on a map. You walk into any oil and gas company or midstream company, and you're going to see maps on the wall. And they're static, but the industry loves its static maps. And so mapping is important. And, some of the things that you can do with maps today and layer, visualization on top of that, whether you're using D3 or whatever, is pretty fascinating and cool. And then in our space, Esri's really had the foothold in the industry when it comes to mapping. But there's a lot of really, exciting things that we can bring to the space. For example, one of the things that we did early on, which wasn't really prevalent at all, was animation. So time series animation. So being able to throw the data on a time bar and see a lease trend evolve over several counties over a period of months, right? And kind of see where things are trending. That was revolutionary for the time. You go into fintech and those types of things have existed for a decade, but you go into oil and gas and you're needing to pass out Dramamine. If you look at some of the BI tools, Spotfire's really got a foothold in the space when it comes to analytics. The industry loves Spotfire. And
I don't know what that is.
Tableau, are you familiar with Tableau?
Sure. So it's like Tableau for oil and gas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they do a lot more than oil and gas, but they've really done well in oil and gas. And so those types of BI tools you see in the space, those things all, resonate with us. But for us, we are perfectly happy pumping our data into a Spotfire dashboard. We have plans to continue to build visualization tools like that, but we don't need to own the desktop, so to speak. That's not necessarily something that we feel like is part of our mission and our charge.
Well, it's smart because you're picking your battles and you're looking at your core competency and saying, okay, we're really good at gathering this data that's difficult to parse, difficult to collect. And if you could just be the back end of data, that's really defensible as opposed to being the back end of data plus a bunch of shiny interfaces.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We have a great product. I mean, we've got, a large number of users that love our interface and application. And for certain companies, it's everything that they need. But we don't feel like we absolutely have to own the desktop. And it's a combination of our ability, it's a combination of our vision and domain expertise, knowing what information is out there and having a vision for how it can be leveraged to create value for these organizations. There's a lot of creativity that goes into that. And then it's the ideas around what you can actually do with this data and how it can be applied, and then productizing and commercializing that. That's, I think, more of an edge for us than just the application side.
So you try to surface ideas for how that data can be applied?
Well, absolutely. We have to. So we do three things as a business. We aggregate and create unique and impactful data sets. We build B2B SaaS products to enable folks to interact with that data. And then the third part of our business is we've brought client success management to the industry, which is less about training and more about education. So we really get to know the goals and strategies of our customers and introduce them to data sets that maybe weren't part of their workflows prior to working with us to help them achieve those goals and strategies. And so, when there are 200 and something regulatory documents in the oil and gas industry in Texas, a geologist may not be aware of a particular regulatory document that they could use to signal that, there's been a big find in some part of Texas.
How do you have your engineering teams organized?
Well, we have DevOps, front end, back end. Those are kind of the three main groups. And we have functional leads that report up to a director of engineering.
And what are the responsibilities of those different teams? What projects are they focused on right now?
Yeah, so on the data side, you're going to see, anything, and I'm not technical, so I'll probably...
You can punt completely if you want.
Yeah, no, I can make an attempt at least. So, something akin to an ETL on the back end that, the challenge there is we have huge volumes of information that we're trying to get into our product at the same time.
Mm.
And so I know a lot of thought went into the architecture behind, being able to get our data into these pipes and into the product, so that we're not limited in the volume or the number of data sets that need to stream into the product.
Mm.
I know that they're also working on the information extraction piece. So using machine learning, some of the technologies in order to build content models to read these unstructured documents, extract the information out. And then a lot of that data has got to go to a QA and QC team that is doing the sampling to ensure the accuracy of the data, the back and forth process there. We've got kind of a logistics team that is kind of bringing in the data from a number of different sources out there in the market and, making sure that we're getting all the records back and making sure we're not getting duplicates and things like that. And then on the application side, what I guess I call front-end developers, but they don't particularly like because they do server-side development too. But, application developers that are building our application out. So we've got a web-based desktop application that has, visualization tools, mapping, search, mining, and, we continue to build out that application. Mm. And then you've got all the DevOps related work.
Your application sits on layers of dynamic infrastructure and supporting services. Datadog brings you visibility into every part of your infrastructure, plus APM for monitoring your application's performance. Dashboarding, collaboration tools, and alerts let you develop your own workflow for observability and incident response. Datadog integrates seamlessly with all of your apps and systems, from Slack to Amazon Web Services, so you can get visibility in minutes. Go to softwareengineeringdaily.com/Datadog to get started with Datadog and get a free t-shirt. With full observability, distributed tracing, and customizable visualizations, Datadog is loved and trusted by thousands of enterprises, including Salesforce, PagerDuty, and Zendesk. If you haven't tried Datadog at your company or on your side project, go to softwareengineeringdaily.com/Datadog to support Software Engineering Daily and get a free t-shirt. Our deepest thanks to Datadog for being a new sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. It is only with the help of sponsors like you that this show is successful. So thanks again. I mostly interview people who are building software companies either in San Francisco or New York or Seattle. That's probably 95% of the interviews that I do. And many of the people who listen to the show, they request like, hey, can you tell us how engineering works outside of those places? What are the pros and cons of building a technology company in Oklahoma?
Yeah, great question. So I recruited engineers from all over the country. So for me, I wanted...
It's a remote team?
We do have a remote team, but we also have a lot of folks that... We have two offices, Oklahoma City and New Orleans. And we got a lot of folks in both. These are, on the back end, these are Scala developers, all functional programmers. And that's, our team loves Scala, but it makes it challenging because there are not a lot of Scala developers in the tall grass prairie. And so... we find someone that's certainly capable of picking up the language, but the onboarding is difficult, right? So, for us, time and money are two scarce resources. And so getting somebody in and getting them up to speed and onboarding them, getting them to commit code when maybe they were a Java developer, but not a Scala developer, it takes time. And so that's definitely challenging. But, like I said, we have a remote team. And so we've got, folks all over the country there. There's a lot of great engineering talent, in the tall grass prairie. It's difficult to find. We've been really working to build a community. There's not much of an engineering community in this part of the country. And a lot of the developers are .NET developers. Some of them have experience working in open source, but it's tough to find talent. I mean, it's tough to find talent everywhere.
Of course.
That's a problem that you hear, coast to coast. But, we work with, some cutting edge technologies. and we're tackling very difficult and challenging problems in an industry that represents 6 to 7% of our GDP, that spends $200 billion a year in capex, and the space is barbaric. It's the Wild West, and so to be able to bring things like AI to that space, is incredibly exciting. And, I'm all for renewables and would love to see companies like Exxon lead the charge and the change there. But the reality is that we're going to be a carbon-based economy for the next 10, 20 years. And so we've got some big problems that need to be solved in the interim. And it creates tremendous opportunities for businesses like ours.
And the positioning is really good because there are a lot of these oil and gas companies that are going through the innovator's dilemma on a number of fronts. I mean, if you're Exxon right now, you're trying to figure out how to shift your strategy to renewables. And at the same time, you've got all these questions about IoT. How much should we invest in putting sensor data around our oil wells? Should we completely reposition the company to do that? Trying to do that kind of thing, like digital transformation on the oil and gas part of your business while also disrupting the oil and gas part of your business. They're entirely preoccupied. And I just make this point to say that everybody in the oil and gas business is trying to do that, while you can kind of be over here and just be like, we're just doing the data stuff, and you're very focused on that. Just like great positioning in terms of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I truly believe that the consumer space is fascinating. It's great to see new products built there. But when you look at places like the Tallgrass Prairie, I mean, there's a lot of heavy industry problems, technology problems. There's a lot of interesting problems in agriculture. There's a lot of interesting problems in manufacturing. There's a lot of interesting problems in aerospace, even defense still. Mm-hmm. And those are the industries that states like Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska know well. And you don't see a lot. I mean, when I look at the number of ad tech companies for a $30 billion market, and then I look at the number of energy tech companies for a $30 billion market, right? I mean, it's night and day. You'll have thousands of ad tech companies and you won't have 100 energy tech companies. And so, I love bringing technology to heavy industry and oil and gas in particular.
Yeah. Talking about the renewables and the bigger picture, actually, I just want to jump to a kind of more ambitious question. So obviously a lot of discussion going on right now in our country about what are these displaced coal miners going to do, or what are these displaced manufacturing people going to do? And you have just mentioned that there's all of this low-hanging fruit to be done in terms of agricultural technology. My impression is that the technological acumen is kind of scarce because you need technical people to be able to implement the systems that will update a farm or update a fracking well with the newest and greatest technology. And I'd love to hear your perspective on where the market frictions are between the available labor and the jobs that are available for that available labor.
Yeah, so you're asking me, I think, what I'm hearing is, are you asking how do you match
I'm asking about
expertise with the technology expertise?
I'm sorry, I worded that question really poorly, but I'm trying to ask about the question of jobs in America. People who are trained for manual labor jobs who are being displaced by technology, and maybe they need to retrain, or maybe they have the skills already. I'm just trying to get your perspective on when you talk about heavy industry, because since you spend a lot of time in the intersection of heavy industry and technology, what is the outlook for a coal miner who has been displaced or a factory worker who has been displaced? How hard is it to retrain, or are there jobs that are available right now? Like, I'm just trying to understand the difference between the reality and the narratives that I hear in the news.
Right. So I would say this. Oftentimes, we see, particularly in the oil and gas industry, especially folks in the service side of the business, they're reluctant to embrace technology because they do fear that it's going to, in some way, shape, or form, replace some aspect or replace their, some aspect of their job or replace their job entirely. And when I talk to folks in the service industry, I try to encourage them to embrace technology, because the one thing that I've noticed is that, you often talk about, you often hear about the generational crew shift change in the oil and gas industry. In the 80s, there was a bust and an enormous of professionals left the oil and gas industry. But what left with the industry wasn't just, a generation, it was also a bunch of technology, right? That's why the opportunities exist in the oil and gas industry today, is because, the folks that stayed with 30, 40 years experience, they're really not all that familiar with what's possible with technology. They don't understand, what NLP or AI is. They are still trying to wrap their head around data analytics and what's possible. But they have some qualitative experience that computers just can't replace. They have this qualitative experience that you need in order to understand, what products need to be built, what data sets need to be built. And so, when I talk to somebody in the industry that's concerned about technology, maybe, taking their job, if they would just embrace technology and become a thought leader around, how technology should be built, they'd be creating opportunities for themselves. Because I don't think a lot of folks in the technology space truly understand those problems, because they do lack that domain expertise. And you can be a great product manager and empathetic as possible and ask wonderful questions. But without that domain expertise, it's, at least what I see in our space, it's absolutely critical. I've seen a number of really smart, amazing technology companies, household names that have gone into the oil and gas industry and really struggled because they may be exceptional at data science. They may be exceptional at building products, but they have a very difficult time, understanding the domain, understanding the problems in the space. And so I really can't answer your question in the sense that I know how difficult it is to go find another job if you are displaced by technology. But I would say that if that's a possibility, I would embrace technology and try to find a way that I could utilize my qualitative experience to build better technology.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is a generational thing? Because the people who grew up with smartphones and laptops, getting that fluency with technology early on, that comfort with technology early on, that seems like a generational difference rather than some sort of skill set difference.
Yeah, I do. But I just can't stress the importance of, when I think about building technology, I think about augmenting experience. I think about a human experience. I think about kind of, technology in my mind is supposed to be like the Iron Man suit. It's supposed to take, your wealth of knowledge and everything that you've seen in your 30-year career, and it's supposed to enable you to apply that and be a force multiplier.
Right. So you shouldn't need some proficiency in typing or using specific interfaces.
Absolutely. I mean, that's all about, human computer interaction, right? And good, UI, UX. And so I never want to be in a position where I'm just selling to the millennials, or to the folks that grew up with technology, because I would be missing out on all that wealth of experience for folks that have seen things for 30 years that I and that's what I'm trying to tap into. That's what I'm trying to that's the value I'm trying to maximize.
Got it. Okay, to close off, you mentioned a 10 to 20 year time horizon to getting to renewables. What does that roadmap look like for us as a society?
I think it gets down to battery technology. I mean, we've got to find a way to, seasonal storage, I think, is what's really going to change the landscape. Transportation is a start for sure. And I think that that's in our, immediate future. But I think we've got to find a way to tackle the seasonal storage problem. And I know that there are a lot of really smart people working on that problem.
What about nuclear?
I don't really have an opinion on it.
Okay. Any other interesting predictions about where the global energy market's going?
Listen, I would love for us to live in a world that is less pollutive, that is more thoughtful about how we impact our environment. Whether it's wind farms that are interfering with bird migratory patterns, whether it's oil and gas wells that are just a blight on the landscape. I would love a world where solar, what have you, is fueling the economy. But the reality is that we're a long ways away from that.
Yep.
And I'm focused on making the upstream industry more efficient because it's what we've got right now. It's the best thing that we've got. Natural gas after oil. So
great. All right, Evan. Well, thanks for coming on Software Engineering Daily, and thanks to Tom McCabe for connecting us.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks to Symfano for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily. Symfano is a custom engineering shop where senior engineers tackle big tech challenges while learning from each other. Check it out at symfano.com/sedaily. That's symphono.com/sedaily. Thanks again to Symfano for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily for almost a year now. Your continued support allows us to deliver this content to the listeners on a regular basis.
Wow!